Hello hobby friends. Today I'm working on the high-grade Gundam Astray Blue Frame 2nd L whatchamacallit. Seriously, that's like a medium-length name for a Gundam. This kit features a giant sword with a built-in Gatling gun. Don't worry, I'll forget to mention the Gatling gun for the rest of the video. Let's see what's inside the box. Nothing, because I already built it. This project was meant as a palette cleanser that I could paint at my local Gundam group. As I worked on it, I thought I could record some B-roll of the work-in-progress state for future reference. But since it's a whole video now, I'll take you through a few things I did off-camera. Essentially, I thought the mobile suit's calves were too thin compared to its thick calves that you'll see later on. So I decided to add some bulk in the form of various bits of plastic runner, armature wire, zip tie, and clay circular vents I molded from other Gundam kits. I placed them in places that would allow me to keep as much range of motion as possible. Because the white thigh armor overlaps the hip joint, I had to carve away plastic from the interior to create clearance for the added bits. I basically had to test fit after each added bit of detail. It was well worth it though. Should look pretty sweet once it's painted. With more of the white armor on, I noticed that some of the backward hip movement was blocked. This is fine since I don't really plan on articulating it that way anyway. Plus, it has plenty of forward movement, which is what I care about. In addition to movement, I also positioned the bits to try and blend them with the existing inner frame detail. For example, I decided to use a curved runner section on the side of the thigh so I could fill both a vertical and horizontal void while avoiding the small blue circular detail from the original design, which I wanted to keep. Oops, I sort of broke the vent on the hip. To prevent the vent from breaking again, I place a piece of plastic card behind it to reinforce it. Then I use a paperclip as an applicator for superglue and carefully replace the broken bit with a wad of sticky tack that I prepared ahead of time. There we go, good as new. Well, I just came back from my Gundam group and I had just enough time to base coat all of the metallics. I also painted all of the blue sections. Yes, I am going to split the inner frame color right down the middle, half blue, half red. And I have to say, the mismatched bits unified by the shiny metallics turned out nicely. I'm super stoked to continue painting. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to pull off a hand-brushed candy coat, but it seems to have worked. Even this large flat section looks to be mostly free of brushstrokes. On the blue half of the giant sword, you can make out a few brushstrokes here and there, but it's hard to see at a distance, so it's all good. The blue I used is actually metallic paint from the now out-of-business Model Master line. I transferred 4 of them into this craft paint bottle because, honestly, Model Master jars are worse than Citadel paint pots. Like way worse. Like using heavy-duty pliers on a glass jar worse. In any case, the mica in this paint sinks due to gravity and it won't let go of the side of the bottle, no matter how long or hard I shake it. So I decided that the now transparent paint would work well for candy coating. Which is what I did. For the red, this $1.50 Deco Art metallic should work just fine. The problem is that it's not quite red, it's a little pinkish. That'd be fine for a Char mobile suit, but I'm not painting a Char mobile suit. To adjust it, I'm going to mix in this $3 copper Extreme Sheen. I have previously used this red-orange metallic mixture on this Iron Man figure I got from the dollar store. It's not the most saturated metallic red, but the warmth from the orange copper Extreme Sheen does seem to counter the cold of the pinkish red. By the way, does anyone know why this Iron Man figure has a cape? Now, I did try the red by itself just to see it over the tin-colored metallic base. Here, the pink hue is even more apparent. I mixed the red half and half with the copper Extreme Sheen. It looks a little splotchy on the hand. On the polycap of this hip joint, it covers a bit smoother, though I'm not sure I can call it red. It's more like a rose copper or metallic salmon or something. As I apply it, it becomes clear that I'm running into the same issue I had with the gem I tried to candy coat a while ago. The paint is struggling to latch onto the smooth surface of the metallic undercoat, resulting in increased likelihood of brushstrokes. Airbrushing it would definitely help, I think, but while I do have one, I don't have a place to set it up, so for now, it's hand brushing only. In the future though, I'm going to see if matte coating the metallics will help future layers adhere. One nice thing about hand brushing is that I don't have to mask off these dual color areas, or any areas for that matter. Here I overshot the median with the blue on purpose. That way I only have to spend time being careful with the red. This is only possible because, unlike the blue, the red has its own mica, allowing it to cover the blue in a way that a transparent red could not. Overall, I want this kit to serve as a comparison between candy coat and colored metallic paint. After the first coat was dry, I applied a second one. The difference in saturation is quite stark. It actually looks like a metallic red now. With the inner frame done, it's time for the armor. I went with a medium gray primer instead of white because white primers can sometimes speckle in my experience. Because there is a lot of area to cover, I'm going pretty fast. It doesn't look all that great, but a second coat quickly remedies that. I think I spent an entire evening just base coating the off-white. When that was done, I mixed a little black into the off-white to make a white shadow tone. It was a little rocky at first, possibly because I'm not experienced with this chalky off-white craft paint pigment. Though it is true that sometimes, if I don't paint for a while, it takes me a little bit to get back into the swing of things. Eventually I did get the hang of it though. The cool thing about the glazing technique is that in addition to being able to build gradients, it can also fix them as well. This armor piece on the front of the waist has a slightly dark patch at the higher end of the gradient. By glazing a thin layer of the off-white, it disappears. I also tweaked the gradient on the other side. By the time I got to the thigh armor, I was in full swing and put down the gradient pretty fast. For this next part, I thinned some matte black craft paint down to a wash consistency. I did this by giving it a quick dip in a bead of water on the wet palette. Then I used this watery paint to panel line the forearm panels. It did end up tinting the surface a bit darker, but that works to my favor since it saves me the trouble of having to apply the white shadow in these depressed areas. I forgot to paint this part of the torso white. Since this is a high grade, not all of the parts are color separated. Because I'm putting it over a metallic, it has no trouble getting nice and bright with only 2 coats, though I may have put down a third one. Taking a break from the white, I touch up a few sections on the black sections. Then I dry brush a medium gray over them to bring out the detail. The difference between the base coated black and the black with the gray dry brushing is night and day. The dry brushed one is more of a dark gray now, not the pure black it was originally, but I can live with that. Since the dry brushing worked so well on the black, let's try it on the white. But after I started dry brushing, I don't think it worked out all that well. The dry brush deposited a speckly splotch over my nice gradient. Well, that's going to be fun to fix. I continued, this time with drastically less white paint on the dry brush. The problem is that the deposited highlights are practically invisible. Yeah, I'm going to have to ditch the dry brush in favor of manual highlighting. I placed pure white craft paint on the tops of the curved surfaces and the bottoms of the straight flat surfaces, switching between glazing and layering depending on whether I want a gradient or not on that particular part of the surface. With all of the major colors done, it's time for some glow effects. Let's start with the forehead camera. Since the armor is white, it only takes about 1 coat to get a nice, even lime green coverage. Whoops, got some on the side there. There we go. To help differentiate the lime green from the off-white, which has a similar value, I panel line the panel line with more thinned black craft paint. Not sure about you, but I find it amazing that a $1 paint can work just like panel liner even though it's just paint and water. Just like the armpit armor of the torso, this white base coat for the eyes covers pretty well over the metallic undercoat. I slap down some lime green and it's basically done. The eyes will barely be visible under the V-fin, or blade antenna, so a 1-note green is all I need. Okay, it's sword o'clock. Let's do it. Originally, I was going to make the blades of the sword white, but the Warhammer painter in me is telling me to make it a power sword. So that's what I'm doing. Now, every good power sword has exaggerated contrast, so I mixed a green shadow color. The shadow was too dark, so I mixed in more lime green. Before I power placed the shadows though, I put down the power highlights. Power sword effects often feature repeating high contrast gradients, and the peaks of the highlight mountains will show me where to put the shadow valleys. I make the valleys much wider than the peaks. My goal is to make the highlights look like shimmers of energy crackling down the blade, sort of like a Warhammer Necron blade. I mix lime green half and half with white, and use that to bridge the gap between the lime and the white sections. I ended up covering the white completely, so I restanchiate it. Almost done. I edge highlight with lime green, and then again with white, but only near the glowy sections. There we go. Power sword blades with gradient stripes. And they're not the only things with stripes. The last thing that needs painting are the shoulder plates. I was asking some friends what color I should paint them, and someone, either me or someone else, suggested hot rod flames. So that's what I'm doing. This is my first time freehanding a flame detail that's painted on in-universe. But I've drawn cartoony flames on paper many times before, so I know just how to approach them. I start with the tallest flame and work down in size. Since I'm using cheap craft paint, it takes a few layers to get decent coverage. So you might be asking, why don't you switch to a miniature or model paint? Well, I do have a reason. I want the flames to have soft transitions between the different values as well as the panel they're being painted on. Because of the translucent craft paint, I can just put on layers without having to spend time blending it. I'm pretty pleased with how they turned out. These details are looking hot. Now that the painting is done, let's put a lid on this project with some varnish. For all of the metallic parts, I'm going with Pledge floor polish. I'm just sort of slopping it all over with a super cheap brush that I'm pretty sure the bristles won't fall out of. When the Pledge had dried, I noticed this weird glossy raised section. I guess the polish must have ran down the sides. The bump on this blue part is especially bad. Let's try and carve it off with the hobby knife. It's not great, but it certainly looks a little bit better. You can also see some of the Pledge polish pooling on this particular part. I don't think I put on too much Pledge, so I'm going to assume that it pooled because these parts dried vertically. In the future, I'll try drying them horizontally. Anyway, here are all of the finished parts. The non-metallic ones, such as the white and the black, were sprayed with a semi-flat clear top coat. Well, it's time for assembly. Now, I'd like to do a music montage, but I only have the one intro-outro theme. So, I'm just gonna beatbox. Okay, this part is a little tricky to remove from the wooden skewer. Whoops, there we go. I use a hobby knife to scrape the remaining sticky tack from the square hole. Just a few more parts and all of the inner frame parts are free. Look at these shiny parts. I'm definitely not risking chipping the paint by doing this. Since they're all sitting right here, let's start assembling the inner frame. With the inner frame mostly assembled, let's get out the armor parts. Upon looking at the product images, I realized that the inner trapezoid surface of these shoulders should have been painted to match the inner frame. Oh well. After peeling the parts from the skewers, I ended up with this wad of sticky tack wads. Just thought I'd mention it. Okay, I'm in love with this sword. The green parts looked a bit silly by themselves, but next to the red and blue, the shimmering energy effect I was going for starts to come across. There, the Gundam's all done. Oh wait, I forgot the face. So, for the entire length of the painting process, I could not find the face. I was going to make a new one from scratch until I found it in this box of magnetized Zangor arms. A normal place to find a face. I hit it up with some brush-on primer, and while that dried, I went about fixing a random streak of lime green paint on the side of the head that I just noticed. Well, you already saw me painting white, so let's skip to the finished face and carefully put it on without chipping any paint. I ended up removing the armor on the sides of the head to make this easier. And with that, the Gundam is actually finished. I mean it this time, it's actually finished. Of the 5 or 6 Gundam models I've ever painted, this one is by far my current favorite. The half and half red and blue add interest to the inner frame. You almost can't even tell the difference between the candy coat and the regular metallic paint. I'll have to do more tests before I can form a proper opinion. As for the armor, I love the way it turned out. The volumetric highlighting comprised of gradations and edge highlights brings it to life, allowing it to compete for attention with the metallics in a good way. Though I will admit that a lot of the blends of the white armor are less than stellar and could use some additional work. I started with a gray for the white shadow and worked up in value. Next time, I think I'll start with the brightest white and work down. Maybe that will save on time and allow me to spend more time on the blends. In any case, you have to call a model done at some point, and this one is certainly done. My favorite part of the mobile suit itself is definitely the flames on the shoulders. I could have made the red flames a bit brighter to match the brightness of the blue, but I'm still very happy with how it looks. At this time, I'd like to show you the finished The Origin gun cannon from my last Gundam video. I had somehow misplaced it, but I found it. So here it is. I don't think I'll ever try the craft paint candy coat method I used on this one ever again, link in the description, but it still looks a lot better than the bare plastic. Also, on this kit, the pistons under the shoulder cannons actually work, which is simply tubular. Get it? Because they're pistons. They're made of tubes. Back to the Astray 2nd L. Before the painting process, I had installed magnets in the sword and the backpack. That way I could equip and unequip the sword with minimized risk of paint chipping. Normally, I'd glue the weapons I want in the respective holding hands, like I did with the gun cannon's beam rifle. But the giant sword on the 2nd L is such a prominent feature that I had to pull out all the stops. You can't see the magnets in the sword, but you can see them in the backpack. Speaking of the sword, I think it turned out pretty amazing. Sort of. I do like the green gradient, but next to the red, it looks a little bit like a watermelon sword. I think next time I'll try turning the gradient 90 degrees and have it fade from the inside of the sword outwards, or vice versa. Thanks for watching till the end of the video. I hope you've been inspired to paint some models. I'll be coming out with more videos soon. Until next time, have a good one.